I wish I could remember last night, I said to Renee, raising one hand up and clutching at my head somewhat. But all I can remember is us in the park, and then everything just goes blank. Maybe if I could remember a little, some of this might make a little bit more sense, or feel a little bit less like a dream. Renee looked over her shoulder at me, casting me a sly smile. Oh, don't you worry, Victor. One's first transformation is always a bit jarring. It's hard for the mind to process, but the memories will return to you in time, usually in small bursts, until you've regained them all. But I suppose there's really no need to wait for you to find out, Renee said, still with that wicked smile on her face, as she began to leave the glass bookcase behind. She walked past me gently, towards a table at the center of the room, with some chairs pushed in underneath it. She quickly grabbed one of the chairs and then dragged it over to the only doorway entry to the room, wedging the chair underneath the knob and then reaching into her pocket and grabbing the key on top of that, placing it in and giving it a twist, locking it. Renee, what are you doing? I asked, starting to get a bit concerned. Oh, it's nothing you have to worry about, Renee replied. I just want to make sure that we're not going to be suddenly disturbed, she said, turning to look at me, still with that grin on her face, placing her hands behind her back as she strolled towards me, almost nonchalantly, getting very, very close, eventually so close that I attempted to take a step back for a moment, only to find the table behind me. I took my eyes off her for a brief second to look at the table behind me, and before I realized it, Renee was on me. She had jumped up, leaping onto me and pinning me to the table. Renee, what are you doing? I said, completely dumbfounded for the time being. Renee had a weird ability to do that. So, you want to know what happened last night, right? Well, I was there, so I can give you all the details. You never know, it might even help jog your memory a bit, Renee said as she began looking me over, still having me pinned to the table, her hands on my chest, as she sat on top of me, her long flowing black hair hanging down on top of me, as there was a strange yellow glow to her eyes. The way she was moving was, well, let's call it layered, giving me a mix of feelings that was both somewhat thrilling as well as somewhat terrifying. Getting very close to me and running her nose along my face, brushing her face against mine very gently, and I could feel the air as she smelled me. So, Victor, are you sure you'd like to know right now? You could always wait for the memories to come back on their own. So I suppose it's really up to you. Do you want it to be a story that I tell you, or a memory you uncover yourself? No, as a matter of fact, I don't think I'm going to give you a choice in the matter. It's far too important for you to bumble up. The last thing I need is my father beginning to become active before we've sorted things out. If he learns the truth of events, there's no telling how he might react. It's best to keep him in the dark. It would definitely be better for your health, she said, as I could feel her nails digging into me ever so slightly as she continued to move around, caressing my face with her own, sniffing at me ever so slightly. This experience should be terrifying. I mean, this kind of behavior is kind of, well, crazy. But I'll be damned if the feeling that I was getting wasn't completely different. If you get my meaning. So, Victor, I'm going to tell you what happened last night. It's important that you know. That way you can keep your mouth shut. I don't want you having a flashback and then deciding to ask my mother or father about it. It could cause issues. It's better if, at least for the moment, it remain a secret. Just between you and me. So, first, I'd like to tell you that when I was talking to my father earlier, I was actually telling him the truth. Not just trying to freak him out or make him mad for asking the question in the first place. The question of how far I intended to go. I wasn't lying, Victor. I had every intention of going all the way. At that point, I attempted to swallow the lump in my throat as the thoughts seemed to gather. Her locking the door, jamming it with a chair, and now she's on top of me. Is this going where I think it's going? I thought to myself. And just as I told my father, we didn't actually make it that far. Your transformation sort of got in the way. But there were other things that I neglected to add to my story when I was talking to my father. You see, Victor, I had no intentions of letting you leave that place as a human being. And in the moment, my eyes grew wide. What? I replied. What are you talking about? Oh, well, it's pretty simple, Victor. I was going to give you everything. It was going to be you and me. I had it all planned, right there under the full moon. Under the light of that full moon, I was going to share everything with you. Give you the gift that I can only give once, she said as her hands moved towards my face, gently placing them on my cheeks as she nuzzled my nose, looking me directly in the eyes. Still that ever so faint yellow glow deep inside of them. But my body wasn't the only gift that I had intended to give you. First, I would give you myself, and after that, I was going to give you the true kiss. It's probably not something that you've heard of, so I'll explain it to you. As a werewolf, every single werewolf has the ability to turn others, to bring them into the fold, to turn a human being into a werewolf like themselves. But the act of turning someone into a werewolf isn't as simple as it is in the movies. It's not as if just biting someone one time will turn them into a werewolf. No, intention is important. Not everything we sink our fangs into will simply turn into one of us. No, we have to intend it. And then, even beyond intention, there is the level of our intent. You see, there are hard limits to the number of people that any werewolf can turn within their lifetime, and limitations on the amount of power that we can pass on to any werewolf, so long as we don't give it all. Think of our ability to turn people into werewolves like a glass that's full of water that we can give someone a drink from. The more of the water we allow them to drink, the more powerful that the werewolf we sired will become, which will move them up in the tiers. Just a sip will create a tier 5 werewolf, the weakest of the lot. A few big gulps, and you could have a tier 4, and so on and so forth. And the water does refill, but it takes time. However much you give, you have to spend a great deal of time regaining that before you can use it again. But regardless, the number of people that you can change in your lifetime is always hard set, determined from the very beginning, from the moment you are turned or the moment you are born. No matter what way you try to divide things up, whether you give someone nearly 90% of the glass and then simply wait for it to refill before trying to turn someone else, or whether you give a large group of people just a sip, the total number of people that you are capable of turning never changes, and it diminishes by one for every one person you turn, regardless of whether your glass is full or not. But there is a special circumstance, Victor, known as the true kiss. It is the act of giving one everything, of allowing them to drink every single drop from that glass. Once someone does this, they can never again sire another werewolf. Through the process of turning, they have given it all, and as such, created a werewolf that completely equals them in both measure and strength. To sire a werewolf in this way is to sire a werewolf who is your equal, in every sense of the word. Usually this is something that is only done with one whom you wish to spend all of your remaining days beside. It is an act of true love.